Welcome back to That Fitness Couple podcast, where we talk about lifting weights, eating meat, and on days like today, we are cutting through the bacon wrap nonsense and discussing 6 mistakes people make on keto.
Let's go!
We are Mike and Corey Bethelpowski, founders of Pure Physique, a boutique fitness studio franchise and proponents of a high-protein, animal-based approach to eating for a super fit and healthy body. Many people try keto and many people fail on keto. Then they claim that keto doesn't work. It only worked for a little while, or it's not sustainable over time. But the problem is not keto, it's how they did keto. We're going to cover 6 big mistakes. 2 of them are mental and 4 are technical. So, Corey Beth, you want to kick us off with the first mental mistake that people make on keto?
Well, you know I love these and digging into people's mindset. So the first mental mistake is that keto itself is viewed as a diet, which it's not.
No, I mean, keto is simply short for ketosis, which is a physiological and energetic state that we're putting our bodies in. And all this simply means is that our body is tapping into fatty acids to produce these ketone bodies, and thus that puts us in ketosis.
Well, and we've covered on previous podcasts that we can either burn ketones or we can burn glucose, which is we can burn fat or we can burn carbs. And in a lot of ways, ketosis is actually restoring our body to the manufacturer state, because as babies, guess what? We're all in ketosis. We are drinking milk or formula. We are eating a high-fat diet, and our body is burning fat. That's why those babies have so much energy, and maybe why they're also so happy.
And growing so quickly.
Yes. So one of the second mental mistakes people make is that keto is just cutting carbs, but it's actually not about just that, Mike.
Well, we just sort of mentioned this. This ties into number 1, which is it's not about simply cutting carbohydrates. It's about releasing ketones from fatty acids to be used for energy. The problem is carbs tend to be the one thing that can block us from accessing ketones as an energy source. And everybody gets fixated on, oh, just no carbs, I can't eat carbs. And then they get all upset about all the things that they have to give up. But I think what oftentimes would help people get past that mental block, if you will, is recognizing it's not about forcing somebody to give up their carbohydrates. It's simply about getting your body to access this source of energy. And if that is your focus, if you really want to access fat as a fuel source, then you have to take away the things that are going to block you from doing so.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I do think that a big mental roadblock for many people is thinking about the thing they have to give up rather than thinking about the thing they're going to get. You know, again, as humans, we are very motivated by pain. So, of course, when your doctor says, hey, you may be pre-diabetic, all of a sudden, it's easy for us to cut the sugar and the things that may be creating that situation in our bodies. But the opposite, I think, is true when it comes to food. We don't want to deal with the pain of giving up the things that are pleasurable, like our food, our drink, and our beverage. And what I will say for us is we have clients focus on getting in adequate amounts of protein and then filling in with fat as their fuel source, which essentially is keto. I mean, carnivore is a subset of keto, but the problem is that people just look at it like I can't eat any carbs. And I think a lot of people fail because of that.
Well, we had some discussions this past weekend. It was Independence Day weekend, and we had some lively conversations with many different individuals.
That's an understatement.
Sure was. About the way that we eat, or the way I should say that we choose to eat. Because coming back around to what you just said, this is a choice. Focus is on getting yourself into this state. Then one of the choices that you will need to make is to focus on utilizing fat as that primary energy source and viewing it just from that standpoint. This is just an energy source, just like the same way your carbohydrates are an energy source. I think the biggest challenge is that so many people have emotional ties to things like carbohydrates, that it's not just an energy source for them, but rather it's a source of pleasure.
I couldn't agree more. And I think a lot of it is nostalgic. You know, it's the 4th of July. I want to have the cookie, the cake, the ice pop. It's a birthday celebration. We have to have cake, cupcakes, ice cream cake. It's whatever, right? You fill in the blank. And it's funny, actually, a client had reached out privately that she had been struggling with something specific. And I was like, I thought a million times this weekend about partaking in any number of those desserts, you know? Like, I don't want people to think that we're immune to things being put in front of us. I think that for me, the craving or the addiction to it has gone away, but there's still a thought, right? It's there. It can be tempting because I love ice cream cake and crunchies as much as anybody else. I mean, I don't know what Carvel puts in them. But in thinking about it, what I recognize for myself is that my way of eating is not just about cutting things out. My way of eating, call it whatever you want, it's about feeling good, having mental clarity, having mental energy. And so when I'm looking at alcohol, it's really easy for me to flip the like, I'm not allowed to have alcohol, because then you just want it, and just say, I feel really good without it. I mean, I didn't have a single drink of alcohol all weekend. I didn't have a single sweet all weekend. I don't feel bad about it or for myself. I don't want sympathy. I don't feel deprived. I feel freaking awesome. And I got on the scanner actually today. We have an InBody in our facilities, and my body fat went down, my skeletal muscle mass went up, and I was like, heck yeah. I mean, that to me is the high, you know? So I really want to encourage you, if you're looking at making a change to your diet, stop thinking about what you have to give up. Think about what it is that you're going to get. And it does over time make those temptations, if you will, a little bit easier and easier to look past. I mean, yeah, the ice cream cake looked great. I really was okay without it. And I'm even happier days later that I didn't give in.
That's great. All right. Well, why don't we get into some of the technical mistakes that people make? Again, we're only mentioning four here, and we could have probably come up with a much bigger list than just this. But I think that these are four that are very relevant and maybe some of the most common. So what's our first one?
Oh man, so this is a big one, and one that's probably going to annoy some people because maybe this is what they're counting, but it's focusing on net carbs. So I think before we even dive into this, we have to define what are net carbs.
When doing a ketogenic diet, we know that we have to limit the number of carbohydrates that we're consuming, and what is generally recommended is 30 grams or less per day. So that means that for those of you that still want to have some carbohydrates, you might have to be choosy about the ones that you select, but you still can have up to 30 grams of carbohydrates a day and probably keep yourself in ketosis. It's not necessarily for those of us who are healthy, if you will, that don't have any type of medical condition where we must depend on being in ketosis to always be in ketosis. Our main focus, and I'm going to say probably the majority of those who are joining us here, using fat as our primary energy source. We want to lose body fat, we want to have lots of energy, and we don't want to experience all the highs and the lows that come with being glucose dependent. So that said, even if you are not following a ketogenic diet to the T, it's not about being in ketosis unless you are epileptic or you are diabetic, and being in a state is actually critical to your health. Getting back to the net carbs discussion, we know that most people will maintain this ketogenic state if they are eating 30 grams or less of carbohydrates a day. However, what some very clever people did in Big Food was determine that foods that are high in fiber, well, fiber is an indigestible part of the plant. And even though it is carbohydrate, your body is not going to store that the same way that it would any other form of carbohydrate or glucose. So they started loading a whole bunch of fiber into foods and saying, even though this package says that there are 30 grams of carbohydrates, only 10 of them are net carbs because the other 20 is all fiber. And well, we all know fiber is supposed to be good for us. So more fiber, the better. And this is how they position many of these foods as being ketogenic friendly because of the net carbs. But in the truth of the matter, this was only developed so that they can sell more of their food products.
Well, listen, a lot of the keto breads will advertise things like only 6 net carbs, you're still eating 20 grams carbohydrates. Like, let's,
Yeah, because soluble fiber, right? It's still a fiber and it gets fermented in your gut and it can still raise your blood glucose and your insulin. And it's insoluble fiber that doesn't have that same type of effect, which is why when we are eating regular plant foods, so for those who still do enjoy their vegetables, not sure how many of you are left from this podcast, but for those of you that do, uh,
they stop listening.
the, those those are not going to affect your blood glucose and your insulin. The little bit of fiber that you might find in fruits not necessarily going to affect your blood glucose and your insulin, though the sugars in those fruits will, but it's what's being added into these food products. I remember way back when we were bodybuilding, there were these, what were they? The Joseph's Flats. Do you remember
Of
those?
course I do. Yeah, red packaging, got them at BJ's.
And those felt like they were heaven sent because here it was, this food that was, quote, high in carbohydrates, but, quote, very low in net carbs, made you feel like this was okay to consume and that this would not have any ill effect on your blood glucose and your insulin. And we weren't even keto back then. It was just about trying to manage carbohydrate intake. But foods like that are tricky because it does affect your blood glucose and your insulin. And we also know that those foods have an additional effect, which is more of the addictive nature.
Well, I think you said it. Like, those foods are tricky because you're either trying to trick your brain or you're trying to trick your biology. And when we look at these keto marketed foods, let's just call them, there's different things that are said like, well, it's net carbs. You're still eating the carbs. There's still all the impacts on, right? Like, something is still happening from a biological level. And another thing that I think of is in MyFitnessPal, you can turn on or off a setting that actually deducts your workout calories burned from the food that you eat. And when I think about all of this, okay, fine. If you're doing a very intense, like half marathon or something, of course, you're going to have to consume some more calories. But I don't like all these tricky equations of deducting things in order to make us think differently about, it's like, hey, if you ran a marathon, you should consume, depending on your gender and your body size and all that, 4 to 6 to 800 calories more. Like, why are we lying in the app? Like, I still only ate 1,600 calories because, like, it took your exercise, it deducted it, it added I just want to see things for what they are. I don't like all this trickiness that happens. And so when I see things like net carbs, like how I view it through my eyes today is just a great marketing ploy to get those who are concerned with their carbohydrate intake to purchase said product. And honestly, that pisses me off.
Well, we're going to get into more products in a moment, but one of the other things that we find in this net carb discussion, foods that contain, quote, net carbs, is sugar alcohol. This is another one of those which gets purported as not raising your blood glucose and your insulin, but that's not true of all sugar alcohols, which also is tricky because if there's one that doesn't raise it and one that does, it doesn't make a difference in terms of what's allowed to be put on the packaging. And that's what people don't realize. Then you could get into the other discussions regarding sugar alcohols, which I know you like talking about, which is gut discomfort, like how these sugar alcohols actually affect us on a gut microbiome level.
Yeah, like hello bloat, So you're looking at something and you're like, oh, that's great. There's like no sugar in it, but there's all this sugar alcohol and you feel miserable, And honestly, I feel like at this point, I've talked to enough people to discover that it impacts people in some way, shape, or form. It might not always be the same way it impacts me, which is I look like I'm 5 to 6 months pregnant after consuming said sugar alcohol. But for other people, it could be just general fatigue, discomfort, maybe a little bit of brain fog. I mean, again, these are tricky ways of giving you the sweet taste without it being sugar, but they make it a sugar alcohol, but it's not supposed to raise your blood sugar, but some of them do, but some of them aren't good for your gut. Like, it's like, just eat food for what it is. Like, we have way too often created these chemical concoctions to lead us to believe things are natural, and then we wonder why we're sick. Like, that's why, because you're not eating real food.
Hey, we hope you're enjoying our show and finding it valuable. If you could do us a quick favor, it would mean the world to us. Please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Your reviews help us reach more people and share our message. Plus, we'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks for being awesome and supporting us. Now, back to the show.
The last thing I'll say on the net carbs is that glucose is still produced from low net carb foods. This is just physiology. When we consume nearly any carbohydrate, that carbohydrate, once it enters our body is breaking it down into glucose. And what's not used gets stored as glycogen. So the focus should be on total carbohydrates and not net carbs.
Amen. Okay, we got a little spicy on that one, and I think we're going to get a little bit spicier on this next one. It's another technical one, and that's these keto snacks. Now, I don't know what year. It was like 2017, 18, 19. All of a sudden, we had this surge of like keto Reese's peanut butter cups and keto fat bombs and keto bagels and keto cookies. You could even buy gummy worms or whatever. They're like keto approved. Let's talk about that.
Oof. I mean, I think we can first look back at what we just discussed. In these foods, this is where you find all of the different fibers and the sugar alcohols and all the chemicals that are intended to make this food low carb, yet taste like a high carb, high fat food. With that, secondary issue, which becomes a primary issue for many people, is it's still stimulating you to overeat. And it is still lighting up those dopamine pathways in your brain, leading you away from what keto is intended to do in the first place, which is help you to reduce all of the food noise. It's to try to get your mind away from the foods that you would typically crave and find yourself going to the cabinet or the pantry several times a night to look for. Keto helps break that as long as you stick to keto and you're not doing dirty keto or some chemical filled version of keto, or in this case, fake food keto.
Yeah, I mean, there's those, oh gosh, I think they're gummy peach rings, but they're like keto. They sell them literally in GNC and health food stores. And I'll never forget walking in to pick up a protein shake a while ago. And the owner, he was like eating, they were like Swedish fish, but like healthy, quote unquote, like big quotes there. He was like, try one of these. Guys, I walked out so bloated. I'm like, oh my gosh, why? And when I think about this, it's trying to trick your biology, but you can't. Like, you can't trick the human body. The human body was divinely created to function, to heal, to live, right? Things get in the way of that, including inflammation, but they're all tricks. And I actually equate it to, like, if you're in your laundry room when you were a kid, do you know how a top load washer would spin? I used to love watching it spin, but as soon as you closed the lid, that's the only time it would spin. So what I used to do was take a pencil or a stick and I would push down the little sensor that signaled to the washing machine that it was actually closed so that I could keep the lid open and watch it spin. Now, thinking back upon it, for me, it was incredibly entertaining because we didn't have cell phones and the internet. And so that was my form of fun. But I think about actually how dangerous that is. Like, if our kids literally like stuck a pencil in the washing machine to signify to the machine the lid is closed, you can spin, like, it's dangerous. If you fell in, if you dropped something in, like, there's a reason for that safeguard. And I equate that to a lot of what we do with our nutrition. We're trying to hijack or trick our body into believing something, but there's always a consequence on the other side.
There is. And I think that people would be best served to not try to be so
creative.
Yeah. I mean,
tricky.
This is
cute. You call it cute.
I
like,
do call
stop
it
being cute
all the time. And this is why maybe I am so such an adamant proponent of a carnivore diet, because it really does strip away all of those tricky foods, if you will.
Well, it takes away the complexity. You know, one of my favorite business people to listen to, I know yours is too, we had coached with him years back, is Alex Hormozy. And he always talks to business owners about stripping away the complexity of the business. And we're not doing anything different here with nutrition. We want to strip away the complexity so that you can get the nutrients, the micronutrients, the things you actually need to survive and thrive without all the other complex stuff. Because when people come to us and they're like, I haven't lost a pound, it's like, you're trying to be cute. Like, you're so busy trying to be cute with your nutrition. Like, just eat the basic stuff. I always say the food is the ingredient and the ingredient is the food. My lunch today was a burger patty. I was not satisfied. I then made 4 eggs. I ate 4 slices of bacon. I tapped out over about 1,000 calories. Like, I feel fantastic. I'm probably not going to eat until dinner time tonight. It's 2 meals for me today, and that's fantastic. Whereas if I had gone in, like, let me just have a little keto snack, like, you bet your butt, I would likely be bloated and hungry in an hour. And then I wonder why I'm not making progress. So if you're going to do keto, ditch the keto snacks, no gummies. Like, there's no such thing as a keto bread. It just doesn't exist. Okay. Let's go to our next technical mistake, and that is not eating enough fat. You are so good on this one.
A big mistake many people make when they initially start, and the reason why is because so many of us come from the low fat background. We were brought up believing that the only meats that we should eat are grilled chicken or very, very lean cuts of meat, and even those should only be occasional because it's red meat.
Well, it's
And
rich, right? It's too rich. We'll get into why that's called that.
and then you have fish. All the options, or if you're going to do eggs, you do egg whites, you don't do whole eggs. Many people just enter keto still in that mindset. They understand the concept of dropping the carbs, which, as we highlighted in the beginning, it's not about dropping carbs. It's just simply about removing the roadblock to get your body into ketosis. Winds up happening is they're so low on fat when they start doing keto that they find themselves very low in energy. They find themselves struggling mentally, like they're just in a mental fog. Immediately they are blaming the diet. The problem is, I dropped carbs, now I don't have energy. I dropped carbs, now I can't think straight. Truth of the matter is that they're not feeding their brain and their body the one energy source that it's required now in order to run efficiently. So I always just come back to this conversation of our two energy sources. You can run on glucose or you can run on fat. It's up to you which one. If you take both of those out of the equation, well, eventually you're dead. So we need something to work off of. And if we're not intentionally increasing our fat when we go keto, then we are definitely handcuffing ourselves in a big way.
Yeah. I mean, I think about the hybrid car example we often give. You can put gasoline in it, you could put electric in it. It doesn't matter which, but one is your carbs, one is your fats, and we don't want to overload the we don't want to overload the car on both of those. We want to either keep them both moderate or have an abundance of one and a small amount of the other, or the opposite way. But going keto and actually keeping your fat low is like starving that car of both fuel sources. Like, there's nothing. And when your car is puttering out in the driveway, you're sitting there scratching your head like, I just don't understand why it won't run. Well, it won't run because you haven't given it energy, and if you just take that simple example or analogy and you apply it to your body, it begins to make sense. And I love how you always talk about pick a fuel source. And honestly, there's been so many episodes we've done and why it's beneficial to become fat adapted or to run on fat from mental health benefits, physical benefits, less free radicals in your body, extended energy, hunger being satiated. It makes so much sense, but you have to then consume it. So I think I see a lot of my peers that will still make the egg white and turkey with spray, what is that, Pam or whatever it is, that spray. We did that. Like, I remember doing that when I was so afraid of fat. And we were just recently on vacation and I put on a bathing suit and I said to Mike, I'm like, oh my gosh, if you had told me 10 years ago that I would be eating all this fat and look like this, I would have laughed in your face. Like, I feel good. I look good. It's like I don't know what it's going to take for people to overcome that fear other than just simply giving it a shot. It's kind of like living in like a dark pasture and like knowing there's a green pasture somewhere, but you're afraid to step into it. Like, you can't step into it and believe it until you actually do it. And when you do it, I don't know. I can't speak for the rest of my life, but at this point today here, like, there's no way I'm going back.
I think this one could have also gone under the category of mental mistake. I mean, the technical mistake is not eating enough fat, but you're right. For many people, it is actually a mental block that they can't get past. And until they do, they're going to struggle with keto, or again, at least their attempts at keto or carnivore. That's the other thing. When people tell us that, hey, I think I do want to try carnivore, it's the same exact mistake. I mean, they're still doing the lean cuts of meat, not understanding that you are depriving your body of what it needs most.
An energy source. Let me just paint one more picture too, because I know people ask for in like practical examples. So this would be the equivalent of going from your egg white omelet with turkey or turkey bacon, right? Like no yolk, no fat, like no, no, no. But they'd have like that maybe English muffin or Ezekiel bread or something on the side. The flip of that would be, okay, so we're now going to add some fat. We're going to take away the carb. What my breakfast typically looks like and yours is like 5 eggs whole. So it's the white and the yolk cooked in butter and 2 to 4 slices of bacon. Now I'm just going to say it's a heck of a lot more tasty and delicious to eat that way. But it works really well in actually keeping you full longer. And I know we already did this before, but I just always like to re-mention it in case this is your first episode. But for every gram of fat, there's 9 units of energy in that gram. So it makes sense why it's more dense. It makes sense why it lasts longer and gives you that longer fuel source. It's the equivalent of coal, right, on fire versus paper on fire. The fat is the coal. It's going to burn long and strong and just help to sustain you longer. And personally, I think it's tastier. All right.
I know we want to go to the next one, but before we do, let's just point out an important thing you just said, which was that 1 gram of fat contains 9 calories. Now, some people are going to hear that and say, see, that's why I don't want to eat fat, because I'm afraid of all the additional calories. But there's a different way of looking at it, which is from an efficiency standpoint, 1 gram of fat gets you 9 units of energy. So you're getting more energy per gram of food when you're eating fat compared to carbohydrates. Carbohydrates per gram, you're only going to get 4 calories. So if you needed energy and you could only eat a limited amount of food in a day, which, by the way, we can only eat a limited amount of food in a day unless our hunger signals are broken, which that's a conversation for a different day. But if our hunger signals and our body is working effectively, we may only eat between 2 and 3 pounds of food per day. That is most people's cutoff. That's also why at Thanksgiving or all the holidays, you fill up to a certain point and then you're like, I just cannot have another bite of food. And then even when you get later in the day, you don't have a desire to eat the same way you did earlier because you've more or less met your quotient for the day. But when we think about, okay, what was the mix of that food that I consumed? And if a higher amount of it was fat, you're getting more energy per gram of food that you ate compared to carbohydrates, which is why with carbohydrates, you feel the need to continually fill back up because you're working off of inefficient energy source.
That's so good. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, I don't want people to get freaked out. You just also can't eat as much fat as you can eat carbs. Like you can eat a bag of chips, that's carbs. You can't eat 10 avocados. You're going to get full probably after the first one.
Not only full, but going back to the hunger signal conversation, which we'll have on another day, or we've had many times before, but that's the reason why. Once your brain and your body recognizes that it's gotten all the nutrients that it needs, it's gotten all the essential fats, which, by the way, we have a need for essential fats in our diet. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. Once our brain recognizes that we've met that need, then it will shut us down. In effect, we don't need to have any more. But we don't get that same type of signaling when we're eating carbohydrates, most especially ones that are produced as fake food.
Isn't that funny? Actually, the keys to our nutrition were like in our 5th grade science book. Essential fatty acids, never said essential carbohydrates or essential sugars.
Nope, essential fatty acids and essential amino acids.
Wow.
Your protein.
Our final technical mistake is one that many people run into, and that's not replacing electrolytes.
We've made this mistake. I've made this mistake, I know, on more than one occasion. And even still, following a carnivore diet, I still recognize at times I am lacking in this department. And the longer we are doing keto or carnivore, I believe you reach a point where your needs for electrolytes actually increase. Some will argue the opposite, that they actually decrease as your body adapts. I think this may just be a situation of individual differences. I think for one, if you're not getting enough electrolytes, this is one of the other primary reasons why you're feeling your energy levels drop significantly.
So how would one go about getting electrolytes?
Well, first, it's not being afraid to pass the salt.
This is another topic of fear that people have, right? Like low sodium, everything. No.
No, I mean, your body needs anywhere from 3 to 5 grams sodium each day. And if you're following a typical standard American diet, you're probably not getting that. I should say, if you're following a typical standard American fat loss diet, you are certainly not getting that.
Can we just equate those grams to milligrams? So 3 to 5 grams, which is what our body requires, is actually 3,000 to 5,000 milligrams of sodium.
Correct.
That's a lot.
Sounds like a lot, but it's actually appropriate.
Well, again, like you can look at any food in the supermarket, from Tostito chips to chicken broths, right? There's always going to be a lower sodium option, and we won't get into the reason and the science and all the things. But when you're not eating carbohydrates, there's a need to replace the electrolytes you would have gotten in carbohydrates with salts or electrolytes.
Yeah, because what's going to happen is when we are reducing or eliminating our carbohydrates, there's less molecules for water to latch onto inside of your body. And so once we eliminate that, now we are eliminating water more frequently through our urine, and there's nothing to latch on for the water that we're putting in our body unless there's enough sodium present. And going low carb and low sodium is, that's going to spell disaster for most people, and they're going to feel it energetically, and they're going to blame the diet, but it was this adjustment that needed to be made that nobody ever talks about. Nobody ever tells you when you go keto, oh, by the way, in addition to cutting your carbohydrates, you're supposed to consume more sodium. You're supposed to eat more fat. If we're not told this, then of course we are blaming the diet for the failures.
Well, and they're almost like, they're not actually fatal mistakes, but they're fatal mistakes to the diet or way of eating. It's not a diet, right? We're not going to have success on it. So practical ways to do this would be just straight electrolytes, right? You can go to the store, you can get a package. I would say biggest things to look out for would be your food coloring, absolutely not necessary in an electrolyte, or just straight up salt. For us, we use Redmond's. I put a teaspoon in water. There were a lot of mornings actually that I would have that before coffee and felt really great and hydrated. And more recently, I haven't felt the need to have it. We've also had a friend share some electrolytes with us. But again, typically you can grab these through the store. There's some great marketing, like social marketing companies that are out there. But we want to look for the cleanest form of electrolytes, and there should never be Red 40 in your electrolytes, just saying.
No, and the most simple one, you mentioned Redmond's Real Salt, Celtic Sea Salt, even pink Himalayan salt, all those could be good, and that should be used on your food.
Yeah.
It's not just for taste. I mean, it brings out a lot more flavor in your meats, for sure, but that is also something that's going to help you in the long run.
Well, I hope that this was incredibly helpful for those of you that have embarked upon or are thinking of embarking upon, or also for that third group of people that were like, keto didn't work for me. Well, maybe you can kind of go through, do a little self-assessment. What are some areas that maybe you weren't knowledgeable in, right? We hope that filled in some gaps for you, and we look forward to having you guys back here on the next episode of That Fitness Couple, where we talk about lifting heavy weights at our fitness franchises, Pure Physique, eating healthy fat, and really just becoming the most energized, best version of you, because you are worth it and you deserve it.
Let's go.